Joining me now are Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics, John Della Volpe, Director of Polling at Real Clear Opinion Research, and Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News. Welcome back, gentlemen. Thanks for doing this.
Good to be with you.
So, Matthew, there seems to be a huge gulf between Catholics who follow the teachings of the church and those who don't. How does that play out in the poll?
Well, there's often been a tendency in polling of Catholics that they're self-identified. With this polling, especially thanks to the expertise of Real Clear Opinion Research, that we've been able to look at the Catholic vote and Catholic voters in a much more almost microscopic fashion. And what we find is that there is, in fact, a significant gulf among Catholics between those who are devout or practice the faith more actively, that's about a fifth of the total Catholic population, and those who either the faith impacts them only slightly, or they reject some teachings of the church, or they accept only some or most of the teachings of the church. That gulf tells you almost everything you need to know about how a Catholic is likely to vote, but increasingly also where they stand on the key cultural and moral issues of the time.
Yeah, John, 18% of Catholics follow all the church teachings. That's what we got from the poll. Who are these folks?
Well, they are more diverse than America as a whole. Slightly less than 50% are white and 41% are Hispanic. So they are more diverse. They are pretty well balanced on gender. There's slightly more females than males. And because of the increasing number of Hispanics within this group, they're relatively young. About a third or so are under the age of 35. So they're represented among every single age cohort. 72% attend Mass at least once a week. 62% pray the Rosary at least once a week. And from a political point of view, they are more likely to vote. They are more likely to pay attention to the news. They are more likely to think the country is on the right track, both personally and also personally, they think their finances are on the right track. Over 60% have a pretty solid belief that the country, as well as their own finances, are headed in the right direction. And as we mentioned last night, they are overwhelmingly supportive of President Trump and his reelection.
Yeah, Carl, I'd like to direct this question to you. What does this poll tell us about Catholics on key cultural issues?
Well, let's talk about Catholics as a whole now, because there are a couple of issues which the American Catholicism is kind of united. And one is Catholics think that television, they'd like to see more family-oriented programming. They'd like to see healthier programming for their kids. Another area in which there isn't a lot of difference between Catholics is they feel that there's some anti-religion feeling in Hollywood and the elites directed at them, and they don't like that either. And they're tolerant too. John asked a question on transgender bathrooms. Very little difference between nominal Catholics, if you will, and the very devout Catholics and the Catholics in the middle.
You know, we talked about kind of that gulf, that divide between some of the Catholic voters. John, what about the commonality between them?
There are a couple of areas of commonality, again, that cut across the level of kind of practice and devoutness, one of which is the death penalty. You know, there is very little difference in the death penalty. Overall, among all Catholics, about 57% support the use of the death penalty, and there is a majority, or at least a plurality, across every single demographic cohort within the Catholic vote on the death penalty. That's one example. And as I mentioned earlier, the sense that their own financial well-being is stronger than it was 4 years ago is another issue that kind of connects all Catholics. A lot of things separate party, ideology, some hot-button issues, but on the issues related to death penalty and personal finances, Catholics, the degree to which they attend Mass, they all seem to be pointed in the same direction.
Matthew, any final thoughts?
Yeah, to pick up on a couple of the threads that we've been talking about today, the 18% of Catholics who consider themselves to be devout or active Catholics really are an important element, not just in the election, but also in how Catholics are living their lives. If we look at a question like intrinsic evil, there's uniformity across the board. It's one of those areas of common ground. 81% believe in hell, similar numbers believe in the devil, and yet we have half of all Catholics do not believe that abortion is an intrinsic evil, similar with euthanasia and also physician-assisted suicide. Those who are devout or active Catholics have much higher numbers in that regard. They're still too low as far as the church is concerned. But that's an important element, and that, I think, in the future is going to have to be something that we'll be monitoring very closely.
All right. Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this, but we have to wrap it up. Thank you, gentlemen, again. Matthew Bunson, Carl Cannon, and John Della Volpe. A pleasure.